order. This is the CWMP Ad Hoc Committee meeting, November 18th, 6 o'clock. And I guess we'll start with a roll call. Chris, if you could do that for us, please.
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. Before we do the roll call, just a notice that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the Town of Barnstable's Government Access Channel in accordance with Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 20. The chair must inquire whether anyone else is recording this meeting, and if so, to please make their presence known. With that, is anyone else recording this meeting? Lovely. Now I'll go into the roll call. Luis O'Neill.
Here.
Glenn Snell.
Here.
Butch Roberts. Here. Tom Cambereri.
That's good. It rhymes with Tipperary.
Hey, there we go.
No, good. Irish name. Yeah. I'm here.
Awesome. Rob O'Leary. Z. Crocker.
Present.
Brian Hughes. Here. Scott Horsley.
Present.
Paul Neary.
Here.
Gordon Starr. Chris Clark. All right, that's roll call.
Thank you, Chris. Next item on the agenda is approval of the October 22nd minutes. Have members had a chance to look at it? And I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Chris, just a question. We don't need roll call votes for actions like that, do we?
For the approval, I do not believe that we need the meeting minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Roll call for the meeting minutes, pardon me.
Okay. The next item is committee email. I don't know that we've gotten much, but we do have an email set up to go to, I believe they go directly to Brian and I, and then we'll distribute them as we get them. Is that correct, Chris? Sorry, Chris is doing multitasking here.
Sorry, yes, that is correct. Barnstable CWMP at town.barnstable.ma.us is the email. It is posted on the ad hoc committee tab of the Barnstable Water Resources website. You are correct. We have not really gotten much anything because we really haven't publicized it yet. The only thing we've really gotten is town newsletters and all that stuff, but it is live and available.
Chris, just a question. How do you plan to publicize that?
As we proceed with this committee, we can utilize that email kind of as a gathering ground for if we ever want to outreach to the public, they can email that, kind of that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we're going to move on to our first substantive agenda item here, and this is a question and answer period as a result of the homework that we all had and I'm sure completed. I know myself, I had watched about half of these live, and I watched them all again, and I have to say they were incredibly informative, and I do want to start again by complimenting the staff here. I agree with some of the comments. I've worked for a couple consulting firms, and I have to say this was an incredible job, internal job with a great staff, so I really want to commend the work done and also the presentations that were made to the town council. I thought they were really good. So I, for one, even though I thought I knew it all, I learned even more by listening to them again. So Brian and I have talked, and we do have a few questions, but I think the way I'd like to do this is open it to the committee members, and I'll start from my left and just kind of work our way down. If you don't have a question, that's okay, but maybe limit to one or two. If you got 10 or 15 questions, limit to your top one or two for starters, just so we can get around the room, and obviously we don't want to repeat. The staff is assembling up here. They got all the answers, so this is going to be hopefully really informative, but we'll start down here.
The only question I really had was on, there's no mention of the additional dwelling units and how that might impact. So that may be a future question.
And just for clarification, you mean accessory dwelling units, the ADUs?
Yes.
Okay, want to respond to that?
Butch, is your mic on?
It's green. I'm not close enough. Okay.
Just a reminder, everyone needs to speak directly into their microphones, please. Thank you.
Okay.
Knew you would get that comment.
Thank you.
You want to talk EDU and build out?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So we worked with our planning and development staff in developing the build-out projections. At the time that was done, I believe it was prior to the accessory dwelling unit ordinance passing, so that is something that we should ultimately revisit. In some initial conversations, we didn't anticipate that that was going to be to significantly impact the projections that we've provided, in that we felt that we already had some fairly conservative projections.
And I'll just add, I think maybe most people have heard, there is a new law in Massachusetts that takes effect February 2025, which is going to have some significance on this. And maybe we'll put that on the list of potential items to talk about, because I think there is a nice intersection here between affordable housing and this project. So I'm going to list that. Later on, we're going to talk about next meetings, but that might be a subject matter we want to hit. So maybe you can think a little bit about who might be the best expert on this new law. I've only read it once, so I'm not that person, but maybe we can find somebody. Is there another question?
No, thank you.
Z?
I don't have a question, but I will say regarding ADUs that my staff has done some work and some projections. It's going to be in the newsletter that we're going to release sometime soon, and I will make sure everybody gets it. The projections may or may not be correct, but what we did was we looked at every parcel in town and looked at how many bedrooms were on that parcel, and then the size of the parcel, and imputed a target of if you had more land than the 3 bedrooms would accommodate, looking at 4 bedrooms per acre. And we built into that a projection of how many ADUs might be allowed. I know it's just one thing to look at, but we did do that, and I'll share that with everybody when we put it together. I don't have any questions, though. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Z. Tom?
I just had a general question about implementation, and maybe it's in the guidance document that's out there. But if a resident is interested in seeing what the local layout of the sewers is, right now you're putting the trunk lines in, but and as you get into neighborhood subdivisions and things like that, how soon would local subdivision design plans be available, and how would they go about maybe?
So just
Checking
make sure I
it.
understand your question. So you're asking, where could a resident find detailed descriptions of the projects that will go into their particular neighborhood?
Yes.
That kind of thing?
Yeah.
So Chris has on his website, or on the Barnstable Water Resources website, a lot of the layouts are there already for the projects that are coming up now. We certainly have on the assessor's website an indication of what phase you're in. We don't have phase 2s and 3s designed out at this point in time, so that level of design for our neighborhood wouldn't exist for that time. Is all of phase 1 at this point in time in at least preliminary design? I think the end
No,
of phase 1's not
yet,
still.
no. And in the CWMP, there are figures of schematic designs that were developed at the time, generally which way we thought pipes might drain. Those are being refined as we're advancing preliminary design and ultimately final design, and then those documents are utilized for, the ultimate design plans are utilized for the bidding and construction. We provide those documents when the contractors need them, ultimately for connection. We have not been posting the construction drawings on the website, but it's something we could consider.
Okay. And if a citizen had a question,
Yeah, we
guys are
certainly would
available.
provide them upon request.
Sure,
Okay.
but is the question more, is this neighborhood going to be sewered, or is the question, where can we find the detailed drawing of the depth of pipe in front of house number 57?
I think you're getting to the crux of the question, and I know it's a major issue for the committee to evaluate, and that's the depth relative to where their exit is in their house and whether they'll need a grinder pump and that kind of thing. I think that's maybe where the question is going.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as Griffin said, we don't have the construction drawings on the site. We certainly know where where sewers are generally going and where sewers are not generally going is talked about. We also have got a decent sense from the ones that we are currently working on which homes are probably going to have to deal with a grinder pump and which ones aren't, and we started to communicate that to those homeowners. But in terms of 15 years from now, can I predict is home X going to need a grinder pump or not? We're not at that level of refinement yet. As we're moving forward, we'll get there.
But maybe phase one neighborhoods would be, or?
Yeah, so what we've been doing is as we've been finalizing our designs, so once we get to about our 90% design stage, we, at that point, identify which properties we believe will need grinder pumps. Once we have retained a contractor, we issue letters to residents along the route, indicating, one, that they're along the project route, that their anticipated timeline for connection. We also seek information from them about their plumbing to help inform the connection. The properties that we believe will require grinder pumps, we also send them a supplemental letter informing them that we've identified that they may need a grinder pump and that will help them through that process. So we have been trying to do outreach in advance. Certainly 5-10 years in advance is probably way too far in advance at this point. But when we get designs to about 90%, which is really 6 to 8 to 9 months before construction's gonna start, roughly, is when we start trying to have that communication.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Yes.
Anything else, Tom?
No, thanks.
Okay. Rob, you want to pass for now?
I'll
Okay,
pass.
okay. Louise, let's start it down with you.
I'll pass right now.
I don't really have any question. I just want to say that the videos were amazing, and what I learned on those things was I had no idea that this town is that advanced, and I was pretty impressed. And I don't feel so bad at writing my tax check this year. That's all.
Thank you. Chris?
Thank you. That's a good testimony. Appreciate that. I have a question, and perhaps it's answered and I didn't find it. What happens if a parcel or property is for sale? Who bears the responsibility with a time span between selling your property and who has to install the upgrades? Or is that just worked out with the real estate agents?
I believe that's just, will be a private matter that has to be worked out with the real estate agents, unless they've already received their notice to connect. Then that may be a different story. But if it's in advance of receiving your notice of connect, or you're formally told you have 6 months to connect, that would be a private matter that would have to be resolved.
Would it be advisable to send a letter or notify the real estate agents in the community to just say, this would be your responsibility to share this information with future prospective property buyers? I mean, that would be, if I was a home buyer, I would want to know that I have this expense coming at me.
Okay, so backing up a little bit, so we've been talking to the real estate agents. So Kelly's met with the, what's it called, the Cape Realtors Group?
She's met with a handful of realty groups about this matter and been continuing to try to meet with as many as she can to try to keep as many folks informed as possible.
So to the point to that is that we've had a communication with realtors, so they're aware, and we get calls from them saying, hey, is this home in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, we got a home coming up, et cetera. In terms of dictating which of those two parties is the responsible party, I don't know if we want to be there as a government entity to do that in terms of that sale between two entities. I'm assuming that will be discussed between those two entities, and one will make a decision on it versus the other. But at this point in time, we've neither told people who should be the responsible party, nor have we made a recommendation on that.
As long as there's awareness that there's a big hit coming if you're a naive new homeowner in the town.
And the way we've done that is by notifying the real estate associations and the realtors. And now whether I don't know what they choose to do with their clients. I would assume that they're doing the honorable thing and saying, hey, you should be aware this property is, about to be sewered. Or alternatively, this property just was sewered, which would probably make that one more interesting potentially. But we've not in any way dictated how that private business matter relationship should be working out.
Thank you. I had a recent transaction that I was involved with, and Massachusetts is a caveat emptor state, so it's buyer beware. So it's kind of like comes down to the actual real estate agent, so it's a little tricky. I do have a couple questions, though. We're coming up, I guess, on the 5-year plan, and I know that the initial cost projections were what they were, and I know we're kind of looking at. Is the town, in terms of the infrastructure that goes in front of the home, or the property, the town is doing that work, I believe, correct? And then you're subbing out the connections from there?
So the town's doing the work to the edge of the right-of-way. So within the town's own space, the town's doing the work. The work from the edge of the right-of-way to the home is the property owner's responsibility. The town is assisting in terms of saying, these are contractors that are approved to do that, and then we'll also inspect the installation when it's happened. Not that we are telling you how to do the installation, but just to say, does it meet certain standards and things of that nature. So there's sort of a division of labor there. Is that what you're trying to get at?
Well, you know, I kind of, I look at the town as a whole, and there are, when you really dig into it, there are just a mind-boggling amount of projects that are going on in town. And I know that our DPW in particular is understaffed, so I kind of, the way my head starts to think is, as we move along, if it goes out to the public sector, you're going to be paying rate pay. It's going to be very expensive, more expensive than we're probably facing. And at the same time, I'm thinking, like, how can we, I'm sure you've had these conversations, how do we staff it? How do we get enough people on the ground to actually get this thing implemented in a timely fashion? Because there's pressure from all over the place in this particular thing. So maybe it's more of a statement, but it might be something maybe we can look at on this committee in terms of, I'm sure there are lessons that have already been learned in the 3.5 years that we've done. Maybe we can find some, I don't know, some synergies where we can get some cost savings somewhere. But, you know, things are more expensive, and they're going up every single year. So it's kind of like you're trying to catch a falling safe, you know. It's really hard to gather it in. So I guess that would be my it's more of a statement, I guess. So staffing and you know, how do you get people to come and want to work for the town of Barnstable, I guess?
So to date, are we 100% staffed where we wanted to be and where we projected to be when Griffin and I sat down 4 years ago and said, okay, what do we need to do? No. Are we staffed? Yes. And what we've found is we get kind of 2 or 3 different pods of people. The people we tend to get are people that either want to be on Cape Cod that are professionals for other reasons. They've done work other places. Maybe there's a family member here. Maybe their parents are here and they want to come back. Those kinds of people come back into the area. The other thing that we've had good luck with recently is young people, and bringing young people in early and then developing them. We've talked about internally that we're probably more of a Tampa Bay Rays than New York Yankees in terms of a baseball analogy, and that we bring in younger people and develop them. And we now have at least 3 people on staff that came through our intern pool as interns and then came back to us. We've now got a 4th that's potentially doing that now. She graduates in December and just reached out to us today, as a matter of fact, saying she'd love to come back if she could. And stuff. Those are people that family's still in town, so they have housing. It solves that housing problem. Stuff. They're young, but we've got enough senior mid-level people that we can sort of mentor them and bring them along and guide them. And those kids have done a great job and are doing a continuing job. So I think our staffing plan tends to be sort of fall in those 2 buckets, either professionals that are moving back to the Cape for other reasons, that the Cape's drawing them back and we're happen to be here, or young people that want to be on the Cape and that grew up here and that want to now start a professional career here, and this is an opportunity. The opportunity we can offer is kind of unique in many ways at this point. We have enough PEs on staff that we can develop our own PEs, professional engineers, because you need 5 that you're working for to be able to show growth and development within your advanced field, and we're doing that now. We've set mentorship programs up. We're developing them and trying to get them into, within our profession, you have to go through the fundamentals of engineering exam and then eventually the PE exam. We're getting them through those processes and working through that. So on the engineering side, do we have everybody we'd obviously love to have? No, we're not the New York Yankees. But we've got people, and they're doing well, and they're working hard. And I'm encouraged by the fruits that are being borne by some of these other programs that are happening. So it's not ideal, but it's not despair, not something to despair either. You want to?
Just a follow-up, if I may. So looking at the next 3, 4, 5 years, do you feel the staffing's in place that you can roll this out and continue to move along in terms of getting the pipes in the ground and the whole bit?
Yeah, we anticipate continuing to be opportunistic and trying to seek, these people that are trying to move into the area and try to see if we're a good opportunity for them. We certainly have requested additional people each year through our operating budget requests, and we'll likely continue to do so. But yes, we will certainly need more people. However, I think the team we have now gets us what we need for this year and
25,
in the next couple of years, and we need to continue to grow people from within, certainly, and be opportunistic when there's opportunities from the outside.
Set? Brian?
Okay, a couple of questions. First, how accurate is the model of how much sewering versus IA will reduce the nitrogen loading? That'll help us plan what we need to do.
So let me make sure I understand your question. So you're asking, is the MEP model accurate?
Yes.
So I guess the response I would have to that is the MEP model was looked at, I think it was in this room actually, in 2008 timeframe, was it? 10 timeframe? So they did a peer review of the model because a number of people asked that question. And they went through and looked at that. And what that peer review, which was a number of experts that came in town to sort of look at it, came back and said was the model is by no means perfect, but it's as good as you're going to get in terms of what it's trying to do. It's trying to predict the future based on land use. It is also the tool that we've been told by DEP is the tool of record. So it's the one that we have to conform to, regardless what people may feel about it one way or the other. It is the tool that we're going to work with. So we've gone back and run it a couple of different times, looking at different scenarios to see what one scenario would be versus another. And it provides information on that. Can I sit here and tell you, would I bet my kid's college fund on the fact that it's 100% accurate? No. But is it probably as good of an indication as we're going to get in trying to predict what the future is going to be? Yes. I tend to think of it personally, if anything, as maybe under-predicting, and that we might want to do more than what's been required by it. And I can go into reasons why I might feel that way personally, but I'll let other people speak to what their feelings on it are. But so I think the end of the day, whether the model is 100% perfect or not, it's the model of record. It's the model that DEP is dictating that we're going to use. So we're going to have to utilize that model. And then our energy should be spent to, okay, how do we work around that, and how do we work with that, and how do we supplement that, and how do we kind of move forward given that knowledge? Anything more you want to put on that? And I don't know if that answers your question, Brian. That's kind of...
Yeah, it does. It's what we have, and you're pretty confident of it. Okay, good. My other question is, and this comes more from our local neighborhood on Stewart's Creek, which was sewered over 10 years ago. A few people had their septics grandfathered in because they had upgraded them so recently, according to the schedule, the sewer coming in. And over time, many people have told me, oh, it's these unsewered properties that are cause of the nitrogen problem. And I wanted to find out from you, how much of a nitrogen load do the unsewered houses in our area contribute versus the outflow from the treatment plant, which flows under our area?
Do you have any information on that?
I would have to compile that information. I don't know off the top of my head what the numbers of unsewered parcels from the Stewart's Creek project are. We have that data. I just didn't look at it in advance of today. And then do a calculation to figure out how much nitrogen that is. So I can get back to you on that.
Do you have any ballpark sense?
I have not looked at the latest percentages of connections recently. I will say about a year and a half ago, I think there were still about 20% that had not connected for one reason or another, but the Health Division has been fairly diligent about, in the past year, of contacting property owners that have exceeded their extension dates, and we have been seeing more connections in the past year. So certainly can compile that data.
Okay, great.
That,
Thank you.
that actually brings up a good nuance that's probably important for the committee to understand too, is that though the DPW is administering and managing the CWMP, the jurisdiction for septic systems and septic systems connections and things of that nature rests with the Board of Health. So if you guys, for instance, as a committee said, look, we want to make sure, I don't know, pick something that deals with that, you're going to have to get the Board of Health in here and have a conversation with them, because we do not hold the jurisdiction to be able to do that. So we don't have the ability to go to Stewart's Creek, as an example, and say, you, and you haven't connected yet, you need to do so in the next 6 months. That resides purely with the Board of Health. They have the ability to do that or not do that. We don't.
And one thing I will say is the Board of Health has set a different policy for this current program recently, within the last 6 months or so. Maybe it was a little longer than that. They voted to require connections within 6 months of being told that you have to connect. So there are a handful of reasons for waivers that they've have in their policy, but it's a lot more strict than prior policies have been, for what it's worth.
Do you have another one on the, okay. Okay, I got a couple. So I guess my first one is on timing, and maybe timing in terms of improvements. So we have a 30-year plan. We have a financial plan to finance that over 30 years. And I guess a number of the things, when I listen to the videos, there are a lot of, I think, points relative to when are we going to see improvements. And Rob, I talked to you a little bit about this. One idea or question I guess I have is, would it be possible for us to predict when we might see changes in the estuary relative to when we're seeing implemented, and maybe just be a little more specific on that? As we all know, there's a lag time based upon groundwater flow, which when I went back to look at the maps again, I was surprised. This goes up to 100 years in the top of the watershed. I had forgotten it was that long.
Which is why I think it actually, the plan may underpredict what we need to do, because there's still load coming to us that we've not.
Right.
You know, if something got built within the last 60 years from that 100-year zone, we've not seen that nitrogen yet.
So Amber mentioned when she did her presentation that we're not really seeing conditions change much. Is that fair? But the nitrogen loads might be increasing, development that has been built for 10, 20, 30 years ago. So with 10, 20, 30 years of flow to get there. And one of the other things I've been reading about is nitrogen is reducing significantly in precipitation. Ivan Veliel has published on this. So that's like a decrease. We got some stuff increasing, some stuff decreasing. And I'm wondering if there might be a way to, a little bit of model prediction based upon travel time. In other words, if we build a sewer in an area that we know the travel time is 30 years, we could build a predictive, simple model, I guess, to say that we wouldn't expect to see benefits from that for 30 years. And it strikes me that given our good GIS capabilities in town and our good USGS modeling of the time of travel, we might be able to put something together in terms of predictions on when we might start to see load changes in the estuary. So my question is this something that would be possible? Is it something that would make sense?
I can answer a part of that, I guess. Certainly it would be possible to map travel time, right? I mean, that would be easy, and that would give you a good indication of, you know, if we've sewered this area, we expect this area to reach the embayment in 20 years. That's something that could be accomplished. You know, it's based on existing information, probably the USGS model being the best information available. As far as integrating that into, say, the MEP model and then predicting what the concentrations in the estuary are over various years, that becomes a lot more complicated, certainly. But it's something we could discuss.
Let me try to add on that. Dan Santos, Director of Public Works. So I understand what you're asking for, and it makes sense. The problem is you're trying to refine your inputs with atmospheric deposition and what's in the groundwater from septic systems, but you have effectively an unrefined model for travel time. It's gross, it's average. I mean, to understand travel time from any watershed or area, you know, this is Tom's business, and he can talk to it, but you need soil information where you want to get an accurate travel time. So all those USGS travel times are based on information they've collected over the years, but when we're looking town-wide, they are gross estimates of what travel time would be. So on the one hand, you're trying to refine your model on the inputs, but the travel time is, the only way you're going to know is to do soil borings and calculate, you know, get hydraulic connectivities and calculate groundwater flow times based on calculations based on that information. So I'm not sure that that's worth the effort, because it'd be costly to do that. You'd have to collect information and have field work done. Not sure it would get you a lot, but I'm interested in what Tom might think about that. But I just think that that becomes an issue when you're trying to figure out travel time is we need the more information. You know, in some parts of the Cape, it is more refined, and where they've done, you know, where we've had, like out of the base, where they've had lots of work done because of the various contamination plumes, or in the vicinity, you know, of the airport and the Fire Training Academy, there's a lot finer information available on the geology to be able to calculate those travel times.
I'll just mention, I did speak with Tim McCobb at the USGS last week about this issue, and he did share with me a map that I can't share with you. It's not been released yet, but they are getting more refinement in the travel times. He has a particle tracking model that we could, and I spoke to him about this idea and suggested that we could tie that to the town GIS in terms and parcel data such that you could know each parcel, the predicted time between it and the receiving water, and then integrate that. So anyways, I don't want to go too far down this, but I still think it is something worth considering, and I'd love to just maybe pursue it with staff a little bit. I just wanted to get your initial take on it. And
yeah, if there's a way to do it, we don't have a lot of time.
Yeah, I understand.
So that's, you know, timely and cost-effective, then of course, sure.
I think where I'm going with this is the timing of when we see results should be a factor in our decision-making, I think. And we all want to see it sooner. So, and I'm not sure that that's, you know, I'm wondering if we can move that ahead a little bit in terms of getting a little bit finer approach on that. Because we've talked about one of the videos that I watched, and this will come up later, is why don't we upgrade the IAs along the shoreline? Actually, I think Dan, you were one of the ones that mentioned that in the video, which is, right, I think, a great idea, because that's within a 1-year travel time.
Right. So
we'll start seeing results.
A couple of issues
that
you're saying. You know, one is that understanding what the impact might be, or when the impact or the benefit would come. The problem with that is we're not regulated that way. This whole project has been driven by remove nitrogen. Not remove nitrogen, and a model tells you how that's going to affect a monitoring station in an estuary.
Right.
So that's how we're regulated. How much nitrogen we're removing by a certain date. Not what the TMDL is, or not what the monitoring station says, or what the data is at a certain date or time in the future. It's how much nitrogen. So they've taken away that whole idea about when the benefit comes. So just as a point of information, that's not how we've created this whole plan.
I understand.
But secondly, and I'm a firm believer of this, and I think we all are, is any additional nitrogen we remove from the ground sooner is better, right? Less nitrogen is better than more nitrogen.
Yeah.
So if there's ways to get at that, then that makes a lot of sense, I think, for all of us, and will benefit the community.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's not a regulatory requirement by DEP, but my sense from talking with people and listening to the videos and thinking about it myself is that's a factor or a variable which maybe, as you said, wasn't required by DEP, but my sense is people in town are interested in that. So we can, again, pick this up later, but I think it's something I at least would like to have considered a little bit, maybe in terms of how we might, I mean, the whole idea of this exercise is what can we do to improve on what we've been doing, which is great. So that's just one idea to think about. My second question is, I guess the way I wrote it down here is kind of hierarchy of what goals we're trying to hit with this wastewater plan. And listening to the first video about, which was, again, excellent, the summary of lakes, drinking water, estuaries. Those are the three, I think, primary water bodies that we're trying to address. And as you mentioned earlier, Rob, the regulatory driver right now is the estuaries, the CMDLs. Got that, and that's what the plan is built around. But in thinking through and listening to some of the discussions about, maybe we can't use IAs in some area because we don't know if they're going to treat CUCs, so we better sewer those areas. I'm wondering, my question is, was there a hierarchy? Could there be a hierarchy to look at what's in terms of drinking water versus lakes versus estuaries? And let me also say, ideally, I think the answer is we want to treat all of them perfectly. We don't want nutrients or CECs in any of those water bodies. I don't think that's the goal of the plan. That would be incredibly expensive to do that. So I'm wondering, given the fact that we can't get there, meaning treat every pollutant in every water body, is there a hierarchy or prioritization?
So roughly, the prioritization is we have to meet the regulatory requirements first and foremost. So we've got to meet the TMDLs. That's why we're here, to do that. In the process of that, we are trying to address other issues as it comes up. So for instance, Amber, 3 years ago, did Shubos Pond? Was it 2 years or 3 years ago?
We completed the Shubal Pond Lake Management Study in 2022 and performed the alum treatment in the spring of 2023.
But in discussing that, there was a conversation about, look, that alum treatment is a short-term treatment, it's a short-term fix. What do we want to do in terms of, so then Griffin and I start talking about, okay, sewering around Shubel's Pond wasn't really in the picture initially because from a nitrogen perspective, it's providing us nitrogen value. However, do we need to get up above that, and when could we do that? So then he and I start talking about how do we incorporate that into the plan, where can that be brought into the plan realistically, logistically, et cetera. So I guess to your answer, and I apologize if I'm wandering off it, is that the primary priority is we've got to satisfy the TMDLs for DEP. But as I've said before, maybe to this body, but to others, to my mind, that's the minimum. We also now want to address other things, and the plan sort of enables us to be able to do that. Now, whether that's by adjusting the sewering and when the sewering happens potentially, or whether that's by this committee's 5-year bite looking at nitrogen IA potential, and maybe the next committee's 5-year bite, by then there'll be phosphorus IA potential that we can have a conversation about. That's not on the table now, so that you could go back to Long Pond and Marshall's Mills as an example and go, hey, look, it's 25 years before I can get a sewer here, but in the interim, we could do this. And have that conversation. So I guess maybe that's a long way of saying I don't think there's any priority that's off the table. We have to address the TMDLs. That's what we have to do. Everything else I think should be discussed. You guys feel otherwise?
Okay, and I guess maybe one last one. And Rob, your presentation, which was, again, excellent on the treatment process required, likely considering going to reverse osmosis eventually, and your idea of possibly either indirectly or directly reusing that wastewater as a drinking water source, I think is really an interesting and complicated subject that I think we probably should talk about. And certainly the town council is going to be all over this. It's going to be a big decision, and I think a difficult one. You and I had a great talk about that recently. I keep thinking about it, by the way, so it's been really got me going. So just a question maybe to kind of frame this. Isn't it true? I sound like a lawyer. Right? Isn't it true that? So that means don't say yes. Isn't it true that in most cases going to a reuse situation like this, it's been done in areas where frankly there's just not enough water? I'm thinking of submarines, which were mentioned. Certainly West Coast, we're really water poor. So we have a situation where correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the driver is not that we don't have enough water, but we kind of have too much wastewater. And we're looking to, correct me if I'm wrong, we're looking to treat that water, but then we got to do something with it because there's too much water, I think, for the site. And you've been looking at some creative solutions to that, one of which is to treat it and then get it back out of there as drinking water. So I think this is a unique situation where my understanding is in most cases it's a water poor area that drives us to this decision. In our case, it seems like it's too much wastewater that's driving us to this. Is that fair?
I'd frame that differently. I'd
Okay.
say it's just too much water, period. It's too much water as a resource. Wastewater is basically, water is acting as the carrying agent. It's not the waste itself, it's the carrying agent of the waste products. And what we've established is that we can take those waste products back off the water. So the question comes up with is, you know, if we so first of all, to your point on where do we do indirect potable reuse, we're doing it here. It happens right now. I can show you particle flow maps that show you that effluent from the plant goes to many of the wells in town. They go on a 20 to 40 year travel time through the groundwater to there. So they're not recognizable as effluent, but that happens. It happens in my yard. I have a septic system on one side, I have a well on the other side, and I have a neighbor that has the same situation, and a neighbor next to them have the same situation. And if you think neither of those two shall meet, you're silly. I mean, they do. So it's a water resource conversation is where I like to frame this conversation. And where reuse comes to play is if we are driven to a treatment standard, which is kind of becoming the case, where the product that comes out of the backside of the plant is better than the raw water product that's coming out of the ground, and we are going to pollute it by putting it back into the ground and then have to pull it out again and treat it again, does that make a lot of sense? You know, so, and I get, you and I came up at the same time professionally in terms of what we were taught as young engineers, and, you know, that was not in the conversation at that time. You know, that was, you know, you draw 4 million gallons of water out over here and you throw 4 million gallons of water away over there, and you just do that every single day. Now, to your point, there's places in this country that no longer have the luxury of doing that. And so they've looked really hard at this and started to take a real big turn on that wheel. I would argue what's driving us to that is two things. One, we're starting to get to a treatment standard, and potentially with PFAS will be there, where the product we are creating at the wastewater plant is better than any raw water that you'll pull out of anyway. It's basically distilled water if you eventually go to an RO system. Again, I wouldn't recommend the town do that unless it's driven to there by PFAS or some other requirement. But it's arguable now with the plant that we're building with a 4-stage Barnstable and an MBR that product's better than what's coming out of the ground. And that's at least an arguable position to take. So I think the question really is the quality of the product that we are being driven to make, and then we then throw that away. And so for indirect, as an example, if we take that product, we put it in the ground, we let it travel 2 years downstream, we pull it back out of the ground, it's groundwater.
Yeah.
So what I do with that probably matters, particularly in light of the fact I've got a water system that has enough water for today, but for redundancy purposes needs to go find about 2 million gallons of additional water for redundancy purposes. You know, there's some synergies there that are probably worth talking, and it's going to cost us probably $100 million to go do just the water piece of that. So I think that I don't know that we have the luxury to be wasteful of a resource, and to at least not think about that and consider that as we go forward. I don't know if that answers your question or if it just starts to frame the conversation that's going to ensue with this conversation, but
Yeah. I understand your rationale, and it makes sense, but I think there are some pros and cons that need to be evaluated at some point. And again, I think this is going to be a big decision for the town council. So I just wanted to put that on the table, and perhaps it's something we want to talk about here before it gets to the town council. I'm all done with my questions, but I want to check back with my peers here and see if anybody's drummed up another question. Yeah, I do. Oh, Tom.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to the conversation about the time of travel and looking at when the actual levels will decrease in the water bodies, and Scott's talking about the time of travel can be up to over 100 years for some areas, and the MEP approach, which is the regulatory approach, is defined upon this USGS model that is fundamentally the part that defines the watersheds. And within that model, they did do they did define time of travel bands within that. And so I don't think anything more fine-tuned really is required to have a kind of a first order sense of what the lag times or delays are. So when I go into the CWMP and I see, okay, the Long Pond area, it's going to remove 9.8 kilograms a day of nitrogen towards that goal. That's great, and it goes towards meeting that watershed goal and the TMDL. But I think we can afford to step out beyond that regulatory framework in regards to putting the expense, trying to see if we can make it more efficient, and that we can get to not just the regulatory goal faster, but the cleanup goal, the cleanup of the water bodies. So kind of looking at the time of travel and seeing where a potential sewer program or subdivision up here, if it's in 50 or 75-year time of travel versus a 10-year time of travel. I think there are some things to look at. So I would have encouraged us to take a look at that in a little bit more detail. In regard for the resource and treating the resource, I guess the resource that's really important is everybody's back pocket too. I think the questionnaire asked what the CWMP was going to affect or not. One of them was economics, and the other one was PFAS. Which one was not included in the CWMP? I'd like to know the answer to that, because I think they probably both are. I thought, well, maybe it was economics, but the economics of providing reverse osmosis, at that plant, and the and dealing with the the increased costs and the waste stream from that is. It's a pretty hefty jump. It's a pretty hefty jump, and I look forward to having a conversation as we move forward on that.
Well, let me just add one other thought that you made me think of, Tom. And I took a cost-benefit analysis course in graduate school, and we have a fair amount of information on the cost side here in terms of what this is going to take and when. And there's a lot. It seems to me there's a lot of thought into how that's going to get financed over time. 20, 30 years. But again, what we don't have, I think, is the benefit side. And this might get to that. And the reason I say we don't have it is because what I learned in my course, right or wrong, was this concept of present value. What you spend today is more than what you're going to spend in the future, and water quality improvements in the next 5 years are way more valuable than 20, 30 years out. That's economic theory. Kind of believe in that. So that's at the crux of my question. And I don't know, I think our mission here is to build on what we've done. What we've done is fantastic. Let's make it even more fantastic if we can come up with ideas that we think might help move the ball forward more economically, perhaps, and also time-based. That's kind of at least where I'm coming from. So thanks, Tom. Anybody else? Z?
I'll jump in because it's interesting. We're having an interesting conversation here. I think so much is about cost and time. And I think everybody knows, I'm pretty enthusiastic about the potential opportunities for EIA down the road, but it's really not there yet. We're probably close to getting some fully approved systems that can really perform at a very high level. I'm interested in Rob's conversation about being able to potentially provide drinking water at that same kind of high level. And so what are the costs? You could maybe dream the dream even where we wrap the cost question in a bigger umbrella, and you say, hey, we might be able to do more distributed treatment at the edges, even while sewer and municipal treatment becomes so critical, not just for the cleanup, but for drinking water. And so, it could inform a different tact as different tools become, more clear. The costs are very high, but I always wonder about things like solar power and, I would love to have seen the wind people actually provide us with discounted power, which is what should be happening, but that's another story altogether. But, power is a fungible asset, so the access to power really could change some of the conversation, too, in terms of what we'd be able to do down the road. So, hopefully we'll look at all these questions, and some of them are moving targets, right? So EIA technology is emerging and changing. I think the time to travel question is a very significant one and serious, and we need to understand that. I know that USGS is also working on a report on Cape Cod rivers that's going to come out soon, and we know that estuaries are most polluted by rivers, and we know that the load coming in from the rivers is really significant. That's why, Rob, you at one point had said, gee, we should put a treatment system in the middle of the Marston's Mills River. And maybe we're going to try to do something like that, because when you look at time to travel, it gets there really quickly. That polluted water hits the estuary fast. And we've got a critical area that we're partially responsible for in Katuitt and in Mashpee. Shoestring Bay in that area, which are particularly problematic. So hopefully we'll pursue some of these questions and move forward. I think it's an exciting time. I actually think it's the golden age of a lot of these changes if we look at it optimistically. So that's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Z. Anybody else? Q&A on what you saw? Did we really cover it all? There was a lot there. We can come back. Well, thanks for the answers. I think the next thing on the agenda is kind of looking forward, future topics, what we want to address. And I've written down, you gave us some ideas last time, Rob, and I've written down a few things that I'll throw out, but I'd ask the other members their thoughts, and then maybe we can kind of come sort of a vote on what we do first. But the ones that I have written down are IA technology. It's a big component of what we can consider to add to the plan and certainly get to some things quicker, maybe, in some areas. The other one that came up tonight, which I think is very timely, is the accessory dwelling units, ADUs, if we want to take that on and talk a little bit about how that fits into the plan. The third one I wrote down from the last meeting, and that is somebody asked about the 0% financing and its affiliation with growth potential within the sewer district. I, for one, have read that at least 20 times, and I'm not prepared to get up and present on it because I still don't fully understand it. I find it very complicated, and I think one of the things with sewer projects that people talk about is, isn't this going to cause a whole bunch of growth that we don't want in town? And supposedly there's some restrictions on that with the 0% financing, but I, for one, would love to learn more about that and what this investment means in terms of future growth in the town. So those are three topics that I got: IAs, ADUs, and the 0% growth. Before we discuss which of those is best, members, other topics that you see we should dedicate a meeting to? And I'm really thinking about next meeting, next month. So what else is out there?
I want to jump in on that, if I may.
Please.
And I sat down, and in front of me is a document that's really meant for zoning, and I looked at a couple of the questions, and I really think that even though it's slightly beyond where this committee may be going, the town has to address zoning versus wastewater. Wastewater control is not zoning, shouldn't be, has been, needs to be changed, full stop. And so we got to grab the bull by the horns and say, how are we going to deal with this? It's not by controlling wastewater and saying, let's leave the dirty water and not have housing. That's crazy. We need to address zoning 100%. So I think we need to figure out how to touch that third rail, and I know it is the third rail, but I can't believe that zoning can't help us figure out a way forward as far as that's concerned. What are you laughing about?
I'm going to put O'Leary on the spot here. He hasn't said anything yet. He's the guy that wrote the legislation.
You're way over, I'm out of my league right now, but I find it very interesting. I guess the question is, and I do agree with you, Z, on this, and it's a concern I've always had when I've thought about this. And I guess my question is it appropriately in our mission to do this? Or is this outside our mission? Are we in any position to make recommendations around zoning reform, or at least
So I
an
think
exploration of it?
So contextually, I think where zoning would come into your potential mission is if you look at the removal maps, and if you looked at the presentation we gave, there's a removal maps, predictive removal maps. And at some point in time in that presentation, I state, and it's been stated many times, is that what you're seeing there, so for instance, in the Three Berries area where it says that 60% of the nitrogen that needs to be removed, that's 60% of the existing nitrogen. It's 100% of the future nitrogen. You know, and so where zoning may be relevant to you guys is that is a management mechanism to deal with future growth nitrogen load. Whether you want to go any further than that or not, I don't think would necessarily be part of this committee. But at least from the comment of future growth nitrogen load is an issue. We've build out into the plan. But how we deal with that as a community, one of the ways you can deal with it, and we've talked about it before, and I'm not advocating for this here for people that are listening on TV, is, you can zone to allow it or not allow it, or to allow it only in certain ways, or if you're going to go in with a new development, you got to have UD toilets, or whatever. That's all can be part of that conversation. So I think in that context, it may be something you want to have a conversation about. In terms of should the town be allowing accessory dwelling units and pick a spot, I think that's outside the purview of this, unless you can relate it somehow back to the sort of the wastewater conversation and the wastewater question. That is just my opinion on it. I don't know if you feel otherwise on that. But that's kind of where I think where you would end sort of at that point.
Well, Rob, just to clarify maybe my initial question on this, you're right, the plan includes a build-out analysis, and MEP included a build-out scenario. Build-out means build-out to current zoning. So I think the underlying question is, and I think if you polled other places that had built sewers, in many areas the zoning's changed because they said, hey, we got the pipes now, that's kind of my question.
Well, and I agree with Z's general point, and we've said it for years as we've given these presentations, that for way too long, Title V has been used as de facto zoning.
Right.
And at some point in time, the town's going to, one of the things that we were very clear with planning and development years ago when we started talking about this plan is that once we implement the plan, we are going to take away your de facto zoning. So if you do not want something to happen, or alternatively, you want something to happen, you should probably codify that. Because what you've relied on to date to do that is no longer going to be there. You will no longer have a Title V requirement if you've got a sewer out in front of your house. So I think that conversation could be potentially appropriate. Dan?
Dan?
Well, I just want to add where I think it's appropriate is in this town, we have a groundwater protection overlay district for this reason. It's to control nitrogen. And it limits what you can do on properties in a good portion of this town to control nitrogen. So to that extent that you would look at things like that and make recommendations like that, I think it's appropriate.
Okay, well, we're getting into it a little bit. I was trying to list the potential topics here, so let me go back to ask the committee. I mentioned 3, IAs, ADUs, and the 0% growth. Are there other topics that we should get on the list here that people are thinking of, or do we want to move towards? Yes, Paul.
Thanks, Scott. I'm always concerned about cost, and not at the next meeting, obviously, but at some point near, let's call it the end of this get-together, we really need to review and develop a plan of how we're going to sell probably a tax override of some sort to pay for the second half of this deal. So we got maybe 2026. It's going to get real expensive fast, and I think we need to have a cohesive plan, because it's going to go to a vote at some point, and I foresee it $1,000 a person. Every person who owns a home is probably going to be $1,000 per home, would be my gut feeling. Unless we do the roads too, and that's a whole nother thing, or the other stuff that we're going to do, so.
That wasn't a question, Rob.
That needs to be, you know, long-term. How do we get the residents to embrace this? I mean, we all know what we're trying to accomplish here, but it still comes down to the pocketbook at the end of the day, so.
So two topics I've heard discussed already. One of the financial one, I'd want to have Mark Milne come in and brief you guys on his financial plan for you. He's the wizard behind the scenes in terms of how to make the finances work. He can be more predictive in terms of when he feels, if he feels, and when he feels an override would potentially be necessary, that sort of thing. What we can provide is sort of, based on inflation, this is where the costs are currently. This is what we're seeing. We're starting to open up jobs. So we're starting to see, are we over, under in terms of bidding, that kind of thing. So we can do that. I mean, the good news to date on cost is we've been on time and on budget and so far on the projects we've done. So we're not overriding or overrunning, at least on the budgets that we've had. Regarding the accessory dwelling units, zoning, things of that nature, with the committee's permission, what we'd probably do is ask the planning and development director to come in and speak to those types of issues. Again, that's not really our purview as technical people to be able to do that, unless, Rob, you want to speak to those, because I know you had some authorship in some of that legislation. But I think having Jim come in and talk to you guys about how they view those issues. I know town council has been having conversations, at least, and Councilor Starr, who's not here tonight, but who's on this committee, I know that's been an issue that's been near and dear to his heart, and that he's been interested in and stuff. So that would be someone I'd want to have come in and speak to you on those issues. Those aren't areas that we're going to be able to provide you a whole lot of value or expertise in.
Yeah, he's on it. Yeah, he just couldn't be here tonight. Oh, is he? Okay. All right, so I've got 4 items now. I have another one. Go ahead, Brian.
No, I just wanted to respond to this last issue. I remember last meeting, well, first reading the documentation, the TWMP says we should take cognizance of funding and the problems or potential problems it can cause. But at the last meeting, Rob, you were saying, well, we shouldn't be focusing too much on funding. And let's just see how you want to balance those two.
Yeah, so I guess my point to that was to say, and again, it's what I just said. Mark Milne is managing that financial plan and is dealing with that financial plan. The way the sort of division of labor in town has worked on this issue is we're coming up with the technical solutions that needed to be done to meet the regulatory requirements. We estimate out what those will cost on a project-by-project basis. We project those out in time. Mark builds that into a model to speak to that. We can't provide you a tremendous amount of value in terms of should an override happen in year X versus year Y, or does it have to happen at all? You know, that's not an area where we have expertise in to be able to have that conversation with you. Mark would certainly be able to come in and do that with you and have that conversation with you. But we can't provide you a tremendous amount of value on that front, other than parroting what we've heard and what we've been told. Does that make sense, Brian?
Yes, it does. And you're absolutely right. DPW, you're the technical side. And finance is not part of your purview. But I think that we as a committee are going to have to look at financing and funding a bit more than that.
And as I said, we're happy to invite Mark in and have him come in and, we'll pick a meeting, have him come in, brief you guys on the plan. I know counselors, he's given you a number of briefings on the funding of the plan, how the plan's rolling. It's changed. It feels, from my perspective, like things have moved back a little bit in terms of when we might potentially have to cross that threshold, just because of the way the projects are stacking and stuff. But I would feel like he would be the guy to best have that conversation with you.
All right, so here's what I'm seeing. I was going to put this out to a vote, but let me take a chance here and see if I can throw this on the table and people go along with me. So I feel like we should hold off on the financing thing a little bit, just because we're not sure. We're going to be talking about adding some stuff to the plan, so until we know what that is, it's hard to talk about what the costs are going to be or how to finance it. So I think bringing Mark in here is a great idea. I think we're going to have a lot of questions and good discussion, but my sense is that's a few meetings down the road. I'm inclined to push the IA thing up front here as a topic, and I know a pretty good speaker on the topic. He's actually in the room. And if we can get Mr. Crocker to lead that charge a little bit, he's investing a lot of his time in this, and I think he likes to talk about it. That's my sense.
Really? I never picked up on that.
So if we can get him in, Rob, I'll let you control. Okay, I'm chair, so you and I will control the time, all right?
That's a you, sir.
Mr. Crocker, would you be willing to do that at our next
Thanks,
meeting?
Scott. Thanks for that. Thanks, team.
Hey, so
You
for
know I'll talk
context
about
to
it.
that for everybody, if you're wondering, okay, why is IAs a good, and I agree with you, that's a good bite to take on first. When we did this plan 5 years ago, the IA technology wasn't nearly where it is now. You know, it is one of those things that's changed significantly since we did this first bite at the plan. And as we thought about it, as we talked about, you know, what's the sort of thematic focus, for lack of a better term, of this 5-year bite, acknowledging that 5 years from now there'll be another one and another one and another one. I think it is the nitrogen IA discussion. You know, should nitrogen IAs be brought into the plan? Are there bodies of water, for instance, Shoestring Bay, that we should think about ringing with IAs sooner rather than later? Should we ringing any nitrogen-sensitive body of water? Should anybody be allowed to replace a Title V inside a nitrogen-sensitive, you know, to Dan's point on zoning, should we be allowed to replace a failing Title V with another Title V in those areas? I think those are all conversations that the committee can have, understanding that at the end of the day, those are all policy questions. You're making recommendations back to town council, who will then have to weigh the pros and the cons and the value of that.
And then
We don't have the ability to say, yep, we'll go do that. You know, that will be all parts that will go back to town council to say, the committee, and I'm not saying this is where you're going to go, but the committee is recommending that if you live in area X and area Y and area Z, that if you either sell your house or your Title V comes to its natural conclusion of life, you're not allowed to put another Title V back. You have to contact the Board of Health and put in the best available technology, whatever that happens to be at the time, as an example. Town council will then have to decide, A, it's a Board of Health jurisdiction. Can they work with Board of Health on that? And B, is that something they want to even push? Or do they want us to just not do that? And I guess their constituents would inform them on whether they thought that was a good idea or not. So just to kind of lay out how I think this is going to go, I think it's a good conversation to have, but we at DPW have limited power at some point in time on those fronts, other than to advocate and to recommend and things of that nature, which I'm assuming you guys will be as well.
I was going to say the other player that's important is the Board of Health. And Z and I were out in Springfield, was it this week or last week? Last week. And at a health officers conference, and we ran into Tom, and we had a good conversation about this. So sometimes you got to drive a couple hours away to get the local people in a conversation. But we did. We had a good talk about it, and I think there's some interest as a part of the Board of Health and the town council. So yeah, I think it's a good idea.
I mean, once you understand the technology, so I'd recommend your first couple meetings or maybe your first meetings on, okay, what is the technology now with IAs? Where have they've come from? Then I think another meeting might be, let's meet with the chair of the Board of Health and have a conversation about what their thinking is regarding, I know what the previous chair's thinking was in terms of what they'd be willing to mandate versus allow. That may have changed, I don't know. But I think that's a conversation you might want to have. So that'd be another meeting on it. I mean, there's a number of things we can do as we go forward on that.
And I guess I'll add, Dan, I've heard you have good perspective on this in terms of, in fact, I think one thing you told me recently, which I totally agree with, is it's apples and oranges, sewers and IAs. And I think that's important. That perspective is really important. So when we talk about it, I think we all, at least I'll speak for myself, I don't see it as either or. I see it as add-on potentially, right? But I think to your point, Dan, that you mentioned before, is I think there's some different considerations there. I mean, so I think bringing that in, hopefully you'll be here. Will you be at the next meeting? Excellent. Because I'd love to get your, I think you've got some good perspective on this. So are you good with that then, Mr. Crocker, for a presentation?
Sure.
20
Sure, of course.
to 30 minutes?
I do think there is a role.
Did you hear me? 20, 30 minutes?
I do think there's an opportunity to talk not only about IAs and the technology. I think we're going to have the visibility to be able to look and see the future. It's not that far away in terms of EIA technology that's going to be significant and helpful. And I think we can start to look at the cost. I think we can start to understand what that is. And I think we can start to look at that in concert with looking at sewer costs and understand that. So I think that one area that we'd want to have a close contact and partnership with DPW on is where in the system would it make most sense to see EIA technology. You know, one of the things I think about right away is we're dealing with sea level rise, And in my mind, let's not run sewers to houses that are going to be potentially compromised and underwater in a relatively short period of time. We can talk about what that might be. But these kind of areas, to me, would be low-hanging fruit to say EIA technology should go there. And I think that could fit into Paul's question on cost and how we start to look at mitigating the cost and potentially saving a lot of money. And then we can look at ways to finance those. There's a lot of different pieces of that puzzle. I'll obviously talk about some of them, and you guys will tell me to quiet down or something, all right? All good,
Just
thanks.
kidding.
One of the things I'll point out to the committee, if you watch those first that presentation of the CWMP, one of the things the CWMP always has done is said, look, we understand that there's alternative technologies out there. At the time of the writing, they weren't mature.
Right.
But that the approach the community was going to take is we are going to deal with the issue with a traditional plan. However, because of the way it's phased, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, if we can install at risk other alternative technologies, whether they be IAs, whether they be the bog system on the Marston's Mills River, whether they be the dredging Marston's Mills, whether they be aquaculture, whatever, and show impact to DEP, then at that point in time, you can go back to DEP and say, there's aspects of phase 3 that we would hope to avoid now because we're showing that we're dealing with this way. Phase 3, I'll point out, is not only the last phase, it's also probably the most difficult and frankly the most expensive from a collection system perspective to do because it's farther away, the topography out there is more difficult, et cetera. So as we're thinking about how does this plan adapt, it's already been thought into the plan that that's one of the reasons phase 3 is what it is. That if we can come up with solutions previous that we can then measure results for and show tangible results to, that's a conversation we can then have with DEP about phase 3.
Okay, so unless there's any, I'm sorry.
I was just going to add, the other thing about phase 3 is, to the earlier conversation, it is the longest travel time as well, right?
Right.
And that was intentional. It's the hardest area to sewer. It is also the longest travel time. So we are intentionally.
Isn't some of that pretty close to the Marston's Mills River?
There is some of it, but the highest up in the watershed is the furthest travel time. So large chunks of it are the largest travel time in town.
Thank you. Okay, so unless there's any, go ahead. One more quick, Paul.
So, thank you very much. Only because you kind of brought it up, Rob. When the CWMP came out to us, there was not really a water quality component to that in terms of contamination. So PFOA, PFOS has really only kind of come out recently, really in the last 3 years, where they dropped the allowable limits. So I just want to say I'm all for working on that treatment plant over there, and I'd vote for making it a commodity.
Thank you.
All right, so I will work with Brian and Chris about the agenda, and we'll get this on there for the next meeting as the primary initial topic. I guess I'd suggest, I really like the ideas on the ADUs, the zoning, and the 0% growth. I'm not sure, the town planner sounds like a logical, I think the senator sitting next to me would be a good contributor. And I don't know, I guess I'd ask, do we know anybody, maybe the town planner, on the new ADU legislation at the state level? Because I think that would be a little interesting to get some information on where that's going to go. Chris, do you know anything about that?
Yes, I actually have spoken with Jim Kupfer, and he's working on it. He's aware of it, but he's integrating the new legislation with what the town already has and going to report to the council on that.
He might be a great source then. Okay, thank you. Maybe we can work on that for the next meeting. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Griffin.
recognizing that the next meeting, it sounds like, is recommended to be IAs, we can start working with Jim in the meantime
So that
to
would be-
try to rough out what that following meeting looks like.
That'd be January.
So we're talking about the January
Yeah,
meeting, but I
right.
just wanted to kind of get the thinking going on who we might be targeting for that.
Yeah, there's
Okay.
certainly some legwork that needs to be done too, so we'll start
Okay.
having some of those conversations.
Great. Well, I think that's fantastic. I think we've accomplished our mission. I did skip over probably the most important agenda item is, and that what time are we going to meet the next meeting? We did do a poll, and Chris gave me the results of the poll, and we have 3 nominations. I want to see if we can get one of these accepted. So the next meeting could be December 11th from 4, it's a Wednesday, from 4 to 6 p.m. was the more popular time. December 16th, which is a Monday, from 4 to 6 p.m., or 5 to 7 p.m. There's two options there. And the third option is December 18th, Wednesday, 4 to 6 p.m. So I'm going to ask for a little vote on these in a minute, but do you want to go over them again? Should I give you the dates again, time? Let me do it one more time. December 11th, Wednesday, 4 to 6 p.m. December 16th, Monday, 4 to 6 or 5 to 7. And then Wednesday, December 18th, 4 to 6. So I guess we can just do this by a hand vote, if that's okay. How many like the first option, December 11th, 4 to 6 p.m.? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, I guess we could stop right there. We'll go with December 11th, 4 to 6 p.m. Can anybody not make that here? Brian? Let's try another one then. Can you do the 16th?
Yes.
How many people will support the December 16th, Monday, 4 to 6 p.m.? Let me, other way around. Anybody can't do it? Cannot do it. How about 5 to 7? If you can do 5 to 7 on the 16th? Okay, going once, going twice. Anybody, anybody can't do December 16th, Monday, 5 to 7? Right, Chris? That works? Everybody good with that? Yeah. You cannot do it? Okay, good, because you're presenting. We need you. We can't. All right, so we will meet, Chris, Monday, December 16th, 5 to 7 p.m. Excellent. Matters not reasonably anticipated by the chair. Anybody? Seeing none. Do we have any homework for the presentation on IAs? Zeke, is there anything that you may want to think about? Probably. Not homework for you, for these guys. So look at it. We can talk with Brian and I about that, and if we need any suggestions, we might get a little reading out to people ahead of time, if that's beneficial.
Yeah, let me think about that, and let me talk to, our friends at DPW, and we'll put together a package and send out some information in advance. How about that?
So do we have anything that we should include in the homework that's not IA related?
Good question. Good question. The question is there any other homework that we should be considering other than INA related? Something that, anything you can think of, Rob?
To put this delicately, if you haven't done the first homework, you might want to use this opportunity to kind of wrap up your first homework, but otherwise than that, no. I mean, the only homework I would potentially assign to the committee is I hope you all have a very happy Thanksgiving.
Oh, it's nice, Rob. All right, I think we're, yes, Chris?
Would it be beneficial? I have to admit that I have not yet visited the IA demonstration place at Joint Base Cape Cod.
MassTech?
Yes. Should we have?
That's not a bad idea.
Sure. I mean, I'd recommend anybody who hasn't been there to go there.
And if we go there as a
Yeah.
group, do
It
we
used
have,
to
we
look like
probably have to
Breaking
be under a
Bad,
quorum?
if you've seen that TV show. And now it looks like something else, and they're doing a great job over there. So, sure.
Chris, what are our limitations if we invite a group to go out there? How do we do that?
So anytime that the committee meets and there's a quorum, we do have to post it like a town agenda on the town website. But that is just a matter of me literally creating a Word document and saying, the committee will be quote unquote meeting. I know we had the discussion of visiting the water pollution control facility. It would be the same thing of just having it posted. And then also at that, we would not be allowed to discuss actual policies or have any deliberation at that event.
Go ahead.
From my reading of the open meeting law, I thought that if we all happen to get together for just see a demonstration, for instance, and did not discuss anything amongst ourselves, that it would not fall under the open meeting law, or would not fall under what has to be advertised ahead of time.
Yeah, we can certainly consult the town attorney's office on that. I know in the past, the position that's been taken was that we can't reasonably expect there won't be any deliberation. We're not going to put muzzles on everybody, right? So I think that would be the prudent way to deal with it, would be to treat it as a special meeting if there was expected to be a quorum.
So abundance of caution, we
Yes,
advertise it.
it's correct.
In addition to seeing the systems and learning a little bit more of them, it's possible we might be able to get with Brian Baumgartler, who runs the facility, and have him give us an informal, brief presentation. The other related subject is the RME, Responsible Management Entity. You're probably going to include a little of that?
So, well, I think that, you know, it's an important point in consideration. I think a trip out there would be great.
Okay.
I think there are a lot of different pieces to this EIA puzzle, one of which is a reliable management entity, which in my mind, in this case, is likely to be DPW in any case, but it will be a good illustration of what are the pieces of the puzzle that need to be worked on. You know, not the least of which would be town staff, health inspectors, people who have to understand how these systems work is going to be a huge part of the story and how it would work going forward. So I'm happy to do a presentation, but certainly a lot of good could come out of a visit like that if we can organize it. It may be that could be, you know, a subsequent trip. I'm not sure it needs to be right away, but it could be. Cold out there, by the way, depending on when the weather is, so keep that in mind.
What are the committee's thoughts about doing this sooner rather than later? I think we should offer it as an option. Yes, Louise? Sooner.
Yeah, I would say sooner.
Well, you know, I was going to suggest the other date. We all voted on December 11th, but my friend Brian can't make that.
Where is this?
It's in Sandwich, or at MMR. Is there a time, earlier time that day that you could do, or are you bad?
Be in Boston
Okay.
by noon.
Okay.
It'd be good to have the presentation first before we go out.
I'm with Tom on this.
So wait until do it later.
I would rather do later than sooner.
Okay. All right, let's ponder this a little bit, but I think it's a good idea. And we'll provide scarves and wool hats.
Homework by Long John's.
So we'll come back with this maybe at the next meeting. Yes?
Start early.
Yes, yes, we'll have to pick an earlier time, right.
Yeah, and I think we can also have them prepare for what we would like to
Yes,
hear
good point.
about.
Good point.
Which will be a good opportunity for them to
Yep.
prep.
Good idea. All right. The last thing on the agenda is somebody making a motion to adjourn the meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye.